All right, welcome everyone to the future of identity in SAP and how to prepare for the road ahead. Really excited to be here with Richard Malmberg from SailPoint, who, like us, is uniquely positioned to traverse this space between enterprise identity and SAP. Having also forged his early career focused on SAP for quite a number of years at some of the major financial institutions and government institutions across APAC. He's now a senior solutions engineer with SailPoint, providing really key product development input for the SAP point. My name is Robert Budic. I'm a managing director here in Australia of Turnkey. We're a global specialist identity and access governance provider for companies who are running SAP at the heart of their business. And we've been doing this for well over 20 years now, helping businesses really mature and enable their enterprise IGA and risk management capabilities while still looking after the application security needs of the SAP estate. So really excited to have us both here and present on this very important topic, which certainly garnered some real interest from our audience, which really speaks to the fact that there is something to uncover, discover, and remove confusion from. So just broadly, what we'll cover today is really just looking at what's next for identity in SAP. What is the current state? Why 2027 really matters for enterprises that are running SAP, and what the future really looks like as SAP moves steadfast into the cloud. We'll also look at how to really start aligning enterprise IGA and SAP teams together to be able to essentially make that journey a strategic and a worthwhile one, and really, I guess, touch on with Richard, how do we chart that course ahead, and how do we align those teams that might have to date been a little bit working in a siloed or disparate way. And lastly, we'll also touch on how SailPoint and SAP work together today to bring some of those capabilities to bear, and really have at the end a Q&A session with the audience to understand where some of the areas that we might have not been able to touch on in the webinar, and try and attempt and answer some of those most pertinent questions. Now, before we start, just some housekeeping. We certainly apply Chatham House rules to any questions that you ask, so please feel free to ask questions as we go along. Our moderators will make sure they capture those, and we'll endeavor to answer most of them today, or as a follow-up if we don't get to answer those within the allotted 15 minutes. So, Richard, welcome. Just wanted to say hello as we start on this conversation, and really get also a sense of our audience that might have joined us on this specific topic today. So what we're going to do just right now, just for 1 minute, really just take a stock of the audience with 4 quick questions. And it's really just to understand, I guess, understand our audience and frame our conversation today. And I'll give you a minute to answer them. They're quite brief, and they should be popping up on your screen today. And the first question is really, what is your domain expertise? Where do you see yourself fit into your existing organization? Are you in SAP, identity, or traversing both, or neither? Second question really is what challenges you're facing. Again, choosing a single choice if all apply. And the third question, really, in your organization, how often do the SAP and identity teams meet up and collaborate? Because the theme of this topic really is just how to enhance that collaboration. So really interested to see the results of that. And lastly, does your organization have a path forward for identity and access management in SAP? Really appreciate you answering those questions, and we'll look at that poll as it pops up, and it will certainly guide the discussion that Richard and myself will have today. Okay, so with that in mind, and Richard, if you do see some poll answers popping up on the screen, let me know, because I'm in a presenter mode. And if anything of interest pops up, certainly jump in and let's highlight it for the audience.
Yeah, not a problem.
All right, let's move on to the topic. So what's next for identity in SAP? And for me, another way to really frame that is, why is the market having so much confusion around this topic? I think to do that and to give it justice, I think first we need to start with the current state for most of our existing SAP customers and what that looks like. And I think it's part of this is really just to give a flavor to those who might have not lived and breathed SAP as long as we have, what that really looks like. So in the current state, most of the customers, just as a sort of a brief history lesson, would have started with their systems, some 10, 15 to 20 years ago in the SAP, often referred to as ECC or the NetWeaver stack, with a lot of their, financial systems of record requiring at some point, a little bit more control and rigor, and that's primarily due to the regulatory framework changing over time. So as that regulatory framework came on board with that Sarbanes-Oxley or IT general controls from auditors, SAP acquired solution sets from Versa, known as SAP Access Control or SAP GRC, to really be able to perform some of the basic functionality of IT general controls, both in risk management, in access risk analysis, in user certification, and user access provisioning, and the like. So those capabilities then started to get extended into the identity management space with a separate acquisition SAP made of another Nordic small provider that was looking to really replace the central user administration capabilities that were only native to the ABAP-based system in NetWeaver and couldn't really extend that level of identity, join and move, leave, and provisioning and governance across the business suite or Java applications. And then more importantly, as SAP started to themselves go into some of the cloud-based applications through the acquisition of Ariba and Concur and building some of their own native capability, there was certainly a need there to be able to manage the SAP estate as it got broader and broader. In the following years, we've certainly seen the rise of cloud applications and some of the capabilities around that being extended into solutions like SAP Cloud Identity Access Governance, into solutions like BTP and the cloud platform for identity provisioning. So it is, I guess, disparate products, sometimes providing overlapping capability. And the reason for that primarily, it's, those are some of the needs that needed to be met at the time, and they were not necessarily being developed in-house from the ground up. I think given that overlap, some customers have, decided to house certain capabilities in SAP Identity Management. Others have done that much earlier on in SAP Access Controls. So, and for most of our large enterprise clients, they do have one or more of these solutions deployed in various flavors already in their estates for well over 10 to 15 years. And there was certainly getting some benefit out of those in terms of automation, in terms of being able to answer to auditors and provide evidence of both privileged access and management evidence around segregation of duties and financial controls. So certainly that's been particularly useful, and it filled the need that was there. Naturally, in order to extend to cloud, various bridges needed to be put in place because there was not a single holistic solution to really manage that going forward. So as we got to towards this juncture of 2027, SAP started to make some, recent end of support or end of maintenance, or as some would interpret it as, end of life decision on some of these on-premise products, wanting to move straight to the cloud. So some of those announcements included the end of maintenance support for SAP Identity Management, the end of SAP access control on-premise, and a replacement of SAP access controls with SAP GRC Cloud, which is yet to be built sometime in 2026. So naturally, there is confusion as to the direction to take and how to really navigate away from what is both significant investment that was made in these existing solutions, but also, and understand, where do we already have capability or overlap, or where we might be potentially having some gaps going forward. Naturally, at the same time, as all of this is going on over the last decade or so, enterprises have started their own identity programs to look after the other 100 to 200 applications on average that enterprises have, aside from the SAP suite of applications. And it's no wonder with this sort of level of complexity and rigor that SAP to date really has been treated as a black box, and there's often good reasons for that. And I think it was definitely hard to see how to integrate into that. It was often de-scoped from IAM projects, just the sheer volume and complexity. But I think, from a technological complexity point of view, there's certainly compelling reasons to have put it to the side or at the back of the queue. But as Richard and I will sort of delve into, I think there's also the siloed nature of SAP teams and SAP being special and having its own dedicated teams around identity, around governance, around controls, around the nature of audit expectations, internal and external, that might have left SAP sort of in the dark as far as the enterprise is concerned. Now, I think the important thing to note is really why is 2027 such a big inflection point for SAP customers, and it's really nothing to do so much with the IGA solutions as much as it is to do with the desire and well advertised one by SAP to really become a cloud first company for well over a decade. And in 2027 really marks that point, because SAP customers are really under dual pressure here to both at the same time migrate and upgrade from their either ECC or very early undertakings in on-premise S4 solutions to one of the S4 HANA private or public offerings, otherwise sometimes known as RISE. And at least in the Australian context, there's still probably about 60 to 70% of the customers yet to do so, which means it's going to be a major undertaking to get there by that particular point in time, because normally these significant upgrades do take 12 to 18 months. And at the same time, we're seeing that the identity governance and administration architecture also has to change, because the roles and authorizations to meet the requirements of those cloud offerings, as well as the user experience that is expected, certainly means re-architecting of the role architecture, as well as the re-architecting of the provisioning and governance architecture. So that dual pressure then comes both that customers are not just adopting new functionality and tweaking their roles, but they also have to migrate away from SAP Identity Management, from SAP GRC. And these were applications that historically used to manage IGA and access risk compliance. So, having made those significant investments in the last 10 to 15 year cycle, the next move really has to be a strategic one. because again, companies are under significant pressure to reduce their total cost of operation and duplication, increase their security posture, and maintain governance and improve user experience across the board, not just to cater for one set of applications. As I mentioned previously, enterprises also, realize that identity is at the core of their security. So they have been in parallel in the process of making various investments in uplifting that capability. So either if they were legacy users of IAM products like Oracle IAM or IBM Tivoli, they've either steadfast migrated to other solutions or are just in the process of standing up that identity and access management and PAM capability to meet the challenges of modern digital enterprises. So there's a reason that these things haven't necessarily come together yet, and I'll let Richard, explain and start to explain why that's happened in a little while. But I think important picture is to really just see how SAP presents their target state when it comes to the identity and governance architecture. So here's a picture supplied and a target architecture, reference architecture supplied by SAP of what they look to as they look to the future of all of their cloud-based offerings. So given that SAP, is moving steadfast into the cloud, they are now focused on utilizing open standards rather than necessarily trying to house all of the solutions within their own set. So given that focus on open standards, like SAML, like SCIM, it's really just with a view of simplifying the integration of SAP, and this is all that back end that typically nobody really looks after from an enterprise point of view, and the front end, which is typically looked after the third party or identity and access governance software. So while there is some capability that was built out over the last couple of years in the cloud identity and access governance space by SAP, these solutions were primarily focused on the SAP ecosystem and not the enterprise. And we haven't to date seen a high level of adoption of that solution across our clients globally. So I guess the important bit is that as cyber starts acknowledging that identity is at the heart of security, we're kind of extending this SAP view to say absolutely contingent employees are important, and they might come in your estate from SuccessFactors or Fieldglass. There are other solutions out there like Workday and Oracle that provide and provide us unnecessary inputs into those identities. But I think more importantly, modern IGA solutions need to manage more than just contingent and employee identities. We're typically dealing now with customers, suppliers, third parties that might be maintaining our systems, and more importantly, starting to manage service accounts and various bots and AI agents that may need to have access ultimately to the information that's stored in your core enterprise systems. And hence, as a result, we're seeing a real shift in order to manage identity appropriately at an enterprise level. It needs to be done holistically and in a centralized way. It cannot be done at a point solution or an application, because you really need to get a view on all of the assets that an identity might have access to across your enterprise estate, which, as mentioned, could include 200 to 300 applications in some estates. So there is this almost a native shift to the left, but this is not an easy lift and shift for SAP teams to make, and it's challenging also their roles and responsibilities. And while it is a perfect time to start that joint approach to revisiting your IGA architecture for SAP, both teams really need to engage into what is going to be a fairly long and complex process. But that hasn't happened to date, Richard. And I guess I'll hand it off to you just to sort of cover, why we've had this sort of lack of collaboration and engagement and alignment between these teams as we move forward.
Yes, thanks, Rob. It's very interesting to see the direction, and coming from an SAP background into the enterprise space has been a bit of a learning curve as well, even for myself, even 20 years in that space for SAP, now learning that. And I put this picture here. I generated it with Copilot Gen AI. I just put some details in, and I'm not sure where the sea monsters came into it, but that's sometimes how we feel about an enterprise program, trying to integrate and manage all these applications as well as integrating an SAP. It can be fraught with lots of waters. You just don't know which path to take. And these are the common questions I've been getting from customers across APAC is, what is the best way? What does a roadmap look like? Which direction should I go down? Do I integrate SAP first or do an application? And there's a lot of confusion around this particular area. And so what I want to do next is really debunk some of the myths and where do you actually start? And most of it's not really a technology issue. Technology is fantastic, but it's more of an organization issue. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see that the most of the challenges I've seen is actually in the organization. And when I've been talking to enterprise teams, and I talk to them about SAP, and it's like, you know what SAP is? Yes, it's like a black box. It does something and manages all the finances, but that's it. And so when they try to engage the SAP teams, they face a lot of roadblocks and they don't speak the same language. And if you ever talk to an SAP person, they speak Japanese, T codes and authorization objects. And there's some enterprise people do have an understanding, but it's always been a challenge. And even governing SAP, they always have this mindset that even from an enterprise point of view, how hard could SAP be to govern, and how to I can connect it up and the role concept and everything. But just this lack of knowledge and understanding, and that's what leads to a barrier as well. And also the SAP teams, and I've had this conversation, multiple ones. The enterprise team, I get caught up by a customer and they'll say, can you go and help us to engage the SAP team? They're just not responding to us. And they go, oh, just bring Richard in. He's got 20 years of SAP experience. And then they organize a meeting within a week. And it's like, okay, so there's something. They like to speak to other SAP people. So it's an interesting thing. And the other thing is that, from an enterprise point of view, I think most enterprise teams really want to have that one solution, being able to get the budget. And I think it's all about, they want the resources. That if they know that the SAP teams come on board, then their potential to increase their budget and funding, because they're always trying to scrounge just for everything to onboard more applications faster, get results quicker. It's always been a challenge from their perspective. What I might do is I'll hand it over to Rob to really talk about some of the challenges from an SAP point of view. If you bring up the list, you'll see that there are a number of different challenges. So just hang on one second.
Yeah, no, that's all right. Look, the list is not loading, but I certainly know it off by heart. Having been on both ends, like yourself, Richard, of those conversations, and I guess bridging the gap for most of our clients as we've helped them navigate and integrate SAP into their enterprise solutions. The most common, I wouldn't even call them objections. It's really just not being able to articulate, why SAP is so complex. Why is it special? And I think I've touched on that a little bit, just a little bit earlier. SAP is a core ERP application that really is a financial system of record, and at almost at the heart of any organization, covering all of the key processes of organization is always been treated as special because it is sensitive. It has the scrutiny of both external auditors who need to validate that the financial statements produced out of these systems are a true and accurate representation, and make that given how many of those organizations are listed on the various stock exchanges. Secondly, the regulatory framework that appeared, following some of the major organizations collapsing, like Enron in the 90s, has certainly produced an environment that is heavily regulated, heavily controlled. So I think the common objection is will any IGA solution from the enterprise really be able to meet my compliance needs, because I need to continuously showcase that I'm meeting the requirements as set out by the external audit regulators and others. So I think it was that driving it to some extent, but on the other hand, not really knowing where in their roles and responsibilities will lie if they hand off something sensitive as to another part of their internal organization, who will take accountability for it, and how will that work. So I think thanks to our lovely team, I think we also got a little bit of more loaded in there. I think there's just a fear whether generally these enterprise tools are comprehensive enough. We go back to the SAP and EAS. Will delve deep enough into the authorization and profiles and authorization objects and values? Will I be able to manage and govern this to the level that's expected of me? And ultimately, will anyone understand the complexity of the role-based concept that we need to build in order to even enable users to get the basic access in order? So I guess, Richard, I guess the question on the other side of that, what do the teams, I guess, need to know about each other in order to even get to a point of alignment? I think that'd be really key to hear from you and what your thoughts are.
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. So I think the key to alignment is really about understanding that SAP is the crown jewels of the organization. So that basically, I'm not sure what happened to the slide, but there we go. Yeah, so the importance of SAP in the organization, that SAP is the crown jewels. It runs the organization, it brings in the revenue, it manages supply chain, it manages the finances, payroll, and it's really understanding that it has got different processes and you have to handle it differently. It's not something that you can just put in the box of Active Directory or SharePoint or your other cloud-based applications. A lot more complexity, and then you also need to manage PI data as well. PII, which is more about the sensitive data that's led to data breaches around driver's license, passports, birth dates. So there's more complexity. The other thing to remember is the importance of an enterprise and an SAP integration. That as most organizations start to head down this path, a lot more organizations have been asking. They ask me, they say, Richard, can we integrate SailPoint to SAP? And there's a lot of misconception that they don't know it can or can't be done. And we're seeing a lot more of that, especially with a lot of confusion. And there's been more engagement from the SAP teams to talk about this particular topic, because there's no clear direction from SAP around how to manage identities. Once they move to the cloud, it's going to get very complex, B2P, SAP RISE, and then also it's going to increase exponentially. So being able to have a clear vision and strategy is important. And also, once you have that clear view of having that one identity solution to manage everything, it's just got enormous benefits from an operation, from an end user perspective. They don't have to go into ServiceNow to raise a request for Active Directory, and then the accountant has to go and do another one for SAP. And then once you've got the visibility, you can manage every single identity in the organization, and that reduces cyber crimes. It means that your risk surface to know who's got privilege access across the entire environment is a key benefit. The other thing is really the benefits of collaboration. I think this is really important, that you can start learning from each other. And I realize that the enterprise teams have such wealth of knowledge. Even talking to my fellow solution engineers at SailPoint, they have such an experience, and some of the problems is all the same. We're dealing with the same joiner, mover, lever compliance topics. And so once you start looking at collaboration, and that can unlock funds. Once you've got one platform, you invest in that, bringing that experience together from the SAP as well as the enterprise teams, that's where the real value can be unlocked, and not just discarding them and saying the SAP people don't have that knowledge because they don't understand Active Directory, but bringing that wealth together. And the other thing is really about strategies for building relationships, being able to have that open discussion with the teams. And one of the clear things I've seen is that, I talk to the SAP teams and I bring the enterprise teams into those discussions. And the first thing I ask them is, what are your pain points in your join and move a leaver? And they go, oh, it's terrible. We've got a manual process to onboard users. We've got way too many roles. We've got certifications. We've got audit always on top of us, causing us issues. Can you help us? Can you help? And when they hear this, they go, oh, absolutely, we can hear it. But it's coming with that mindset of open discussion is really key to it.
No,
So
Rich, I think that's a really good point, because I mean, getting both operational efficiency on one end and security and compliance needs that are being met on the other from an SAP point of view, really it is the, I guess, one of the key reasons to align on this.
absolutely, I think that's a key factor. All right.
So I guess, given that, Richard, where do we get started? How do we get this alignment?
I think it's pretty straightforward, Rob. It's having a cup of coffee, just booking a meeting, having an open discussion. Just ask them what their pain points are. What are their struggles in the SAP space? How can we assist them? What and to show them the demos and how that tool would actually help them to resolve those problems. And you get better buy-in, as opposed to saying, yep, we're just coming to take over, we're going to connect up your systems. And there's a lot of uncertainties with that particular approach, which doesn't always work. If you look at that, yep.
Yeah, but I guess given we as already mentioned, it's always sometimes comes down to, when it comes to the human aspect, is really understanding, I guess, what would my role and responsibilities look like in this new world? Like, what would I have to relinquish? What would I have to retain? I guess maybe you can touch on that, Richard, as well. Like how
Yeah.
being clear those responsibilities helps the teams move forward together.
Absolutely. I think the key to it is really about having that clear roles and responsibilities, that the IAM team really look after the solution, the reporting, the budgeting, the licensing, and SAP is a stakeholder of that particular solution. And one of the things I'd say for the enterprise teams, is it easier to train an enterprise person in SAP or an SAP in an enterprise solution? And it's usually the SAP to enterprise is the easiest option. So what do? Enterprise team, they provide them the solution, the support, and let SAP do everything within it. Let them manage the roles, let them manage the segregation, liaise with the business, audit certifications, and drive RBAC processes. And that's the best combinations I've seen. And not to replace their job, not to say our team's going to take over SAP and it will end in disaster. So I wouldn't recommend it. So.
Oh, I think, and certainly there's the organizational benefits that you already touched on, Richard, there. Reducing the total cost of operation, increasing your security posture, really getting that unified end user experience, because I think that is a pain point for end users and managers who have to be involved in the request process, in the certification processes, in the review processes. They really just want to have a one-stop shop rather than going into a fragmented set of solutions, as might be the case today. I guess, just to sort of give a helicopter view of how do you then chart your course ahead, and once you've potentially had that first meetup in the coffee. I think always, in order to do things and move faster together, and prioritize that investment and spend, and also get buy-in from both teams, but also other parties in the business in a broader sense. I think a structured enterprise approach is needed. We would always start with end in mind, given a longer term view of the next 10 to 15 years, really just asking yourself what will your future identity fabric look like, given what we already presented as the sort of target state architecture. What does that look like from an enterprise point of view, and how do you move forward in the same direction of that sort of North Star? I think it is important to assess your existing maturity because not all organizations are going to be at the same point, whether they're been in SAP for 10 years or more. Some would have been on a different trajectory due to a specific industry, if they're in pharma or financial services. So you really need to assess what is your current state and identify really the necessary changes that you're looking to make, both from an enterprise IAM point of view, but also from the SAP point of view, both in terms of end of life of these products and capabilities. Then it's really just defining that joint roadmap and really just determining what your SAP identity governance and administration really needs are for that next 10 to 15 years. And I think once you really set that out and you really agree on a direction, and then it's really just conducting as part of that in-depth analysis of requirements and doing that as a joint exercise rather than enterprise IAM going on their own accord, procuring some capability and tooling and not involving SAP, and then as a result, creating that point of friction that they were not consulted or engaged in the process. For us, it's always about starting with outcomes and capabilities in mind, then really looking, as Richard said, looking at tools once you've identified the people and the process that you want to run, choosing appropriate tools really falls out of that process. I mean, there's a number of factors that will influence strategy and direction that you might take. It's both the complexity of your SAP and non-SAP application estates might drive that, and what the scope is. I guess the breadth and depth of integration that is required, because for some organizations they might be in a hybrid state for years to come, and really just looking at your current capabilities, both at the enterprise and SAP application level. And when we talk about capabilities and having a capability-led discussion, we're really talking about key fundamental capabilities rather than solutions. So we're talking about how do I meet the future lifecycle management needs of my SAP estate, and this is really thinking about automation, cost reduction, removal of risk through either accumulation of access or not terminating users appropriately. Secondly, really looking at access governance. Can I certify access appropriateness? But more important than that, can I do it in a risk-based approach rather than necessarily always looking at it with a all-in approach, which is creates fatigue and just tick boxing exercise for the end users. Next, from an authorization management, it's really just that request and fulfillment cycle. How do we enable an appropriate role-based access concept so that it's an easily discoverable and requestable object in any of your IGA solutions or even your IT service management solutions for both SAP and non-SAP, because end users are requesting access to multiple applications in the organization, and should be a seamless process. And the second last item is really the access risk management, the segregation of duties, which is where some things typically break for the SAP teams, because they need to maintain a fundamental set of rules and permissions and attest to those on a regular basis to audit in order to control the risk of fraud, risk of financial manipulation, risk of access to sensitive and highly private data, and minimizing that exposure given the sensitivity of the system. And lastly, privileged access management. Yes, absolutely important for SAP teams to be able to retain some of their ABAP-based firefighter capability. I think that goes without saying, because ultimately even the S4 solution in the cloud at the core of it is still an ABAP-based system. But it's also important to start to put some other dimensions around privileged access management, and primarily this is around BTP and other non-ABAP SAP solution. solutions that sit in the cloud, they need to be also controlled and managed in an audited way, specifically for those sensitive system administration accounts, the old legacy, word being SAP. So you may have all of these capabilities or none of them or some of them, or you may need to uplift certain ones in order to meet your future security posture needs. Either way, you really need to be clear on all of them and track them as part of the roadmap development with your enterprise IAM team. Now, one of the key questions we typically get at any given point, given all of this, like what enterprise IGA options do I have available to us right now in order to manage this transition and this dual state of being in some form of a hybrid mode between now 2027 and beyond. And I just wanted to, I guess, hand over to Richard to really just give a very brief flavor of what, I guess, a modern enterprise IGA platform that has considered SAP appropriately looks like right now and today. Richard?
Yeah, no, thank you, Rob. We're just going to the architecture. So one of the things about SailPoint has made some significant investment to actually integrate with the SAP, and not just at a high level, but a very deep integration. That's more than a lot of enterprise solutions on the market today. And one of the things is you can connect up all your 100 applications. We do have out-of-the-box connectors for IAGs, for GRC, if you want to continue on to that path while you transition off. We have replacements for access controls for our ARM solution, risk management, EAM, connectors to CIS integrations, and that's coming out in the next month and also be enhanced over the next few quarters. We've also, and that's the deep integrations for your SAP RISE, your ERP, and your HANA type cloud-based connectors. Let's move on to the next slide, Rob. And so what we've done is really broke it into 3 different types of integration. So we've got your SAP Direct connectors, and that's really your SAP HANA, your on-prem type solutions. It's really about the SAP HANA private cloud, the SAP RISE platforms, even your ECC and most of your app-based connectors. Connectors for IAG, that's for the integration. So if you've got that as part of it, we can pull in that information from accounts, entitlements, as well as this new part is really the SAP Cloud Integration Framework, which are rolling out the end of this month, and that will give you access to CIS integration, BTP, and that will be sort of finalized. It's an ongoing upgrades. There's a lot of work, and I didn't realize it until I was talking to the product team, and that they said that dealing with SAP is a lot more complex in connectors than what they say, and you can't just go from an IPS. You have to have direct connectors. So if you go to the next slide. One of the things we've done is really look at it from a framework, and it's really about to have that deep integration in SAP. We really need to have we're leveraging APIs, the direct connectors for SAP's open architecture, IPS proxies. We've got CIS cloud infrastructure and Scheme direct APIs, and that's really so that we can pull all the information, attribute customizations to meet pretty much most use cases on the market across the globe for large and small organizations, from roles groups, user management, entitlements. And that's sort of where ongoing developing that. And that's where it will give us more of an advantage to build it the right way, as opposed to go down the wrong path and then suddenly close that back door, and then we're in trouble. If you go to the next slide, Rob. And so what I want to do is, with the last part, is just to talk about, what a general roadmap. And this is just roughly, some organizations might take longer of that. Really, you don't have to wait to clean up your systems to start with. You can connect up your SAP system straight into SailPoint, our solution. You can build your RBAC roles, and I know there was a question around that, and I'll show you in a second. Run campaigns to start removing access that people don't use, leveraging that technology, AI, to really drive value, extend it to other SAP systems, and then monitor and report and repeat that process again and again as a part of that improvement. So what I might do now is I'll just jump in the system, and just to show you briefly what it looks like from an SAP point of view. And so can you see my screen? Fantastic.
Yep.
Yeah. And so what you've got here is just when you log into the SAP system, you pretty much have your basic, homepage. You can see your certification, you can approve access requests, just standard. And that's not just for SAP, but for everything. So from a connector point of view, where you start is really about onboarding that. And what we do is we provide out-of-the-box connectors for success factors, but also SAP. We just have a lots of direct connectors. And I think this is a real advantage. So the direct connectors, that's for SAP Rise, for ECC, SAP HANA, Analytics. And I saw Reba pop up, that's come out in the past few weeks, GRC, HANA, HCM connectors, portal, and also public cloud if you're really heading down that. And that saves a lot of time. To be able to develop that is a lot of work and a lot of effort. And I think that saves a lot of time. So we've helped customers with that. So when you jump into the source system, once you've onboarded that, what you normally do is you onboard your source authority source, like your success factors. And the good thing about it is once you pull that information in, it doesn't change anything. It just pulls it in and you can start managing and governing it. So I haven't actually built anything. So we've got a complete list of all the users, all the entitlements for that particular success factors, apprentices, sales. That's particularly for their roles. But if we just look at one of the particular users, and I think the good thing is that it gives us a complete view of their profile. And so we can see their cost centers, we can see all their country, department. And so this is the real value that we pull all this information, we can transform, add additional attributes that we can start to govern and manage any SAP system. And especially with the unique SAP IDs, which come into play, that's quite important. So once you've built that out, and the next thing is you really you look at it from an identity point of view, and then you can look at the ERP. So I'll just go back 1 second into what you can do is you can pull in your systems. Once you've got your authority source, then you can start pulling your ECC, your HANA type systems. And once you've connected that, it's pretty straightforward. What it does is once you've got that mapping table, the correlation, and then you can map it against the unique IDs, and then it pulls that information in. And the good thing about that is, and then we've got that mapping directly to that system. It does that automatically once you've connected that up. And then you might have to go through a process to correlate any of the other ones. The other thing is that all the entitlements come in. So everything from a SAP, composite roles, that all pulls into the SAP system. And the good thing is it gives you enough information at that real granular level. So if we just look at one of the SAP roles, accounts payable clerk, which I built out in the SAP system, it gives you a list of all the entitlements, authorization objects, which is a lot for that one, transaction codes. And one of the other unique things that we do have is really around the governance. And so we've got this feature where you can actually classify all your entitlements against different privacy regulations, risk ratings, and then that helps to drive more of those sensitive type access, especially helping you to manage segregation of duties that can be driven into searches and reporting and queries and other things. You can build these into profiles. You can just create many different types of profiles, not a one-to-many type mapping. And also we've got all the identities that come a part of that process. So we can actually see who's got access to what. And even as a part of that process, we can actually revoke it directly from here as that pulled into that system. So as you do a part of that cleanup, and there's multiple ways to do that. So once we've done that, then once you've got all the entitlements in there, we've got this really cool feature that came out recently. It's called Gen AI Entitlement Description. I love this one. And actually, sometimes you get a blank for the actual description of that entitlement. And for some reason, you click on a button, I just like easy, and it populates all those particular details in there. So if I look at some of the S4 Cloud one, BI admin test automation, and it generates a nice clean description of that business, saving enormous amount of time and helping you onboard applications a lot faster. So once you've got the entitlements done as a part of that process, and then you look at the role modeling. So we've got this unique feature called Role Insights. And what this is really AI helping you to find your RBAC modeling to help you accelerate that. So if I go to potential roles, so what it does is it actually goes through a process and identifies based upon your location, department, and position, and whether their entitlements are that. So we just take an example of a potential role that we can create. So what it's proposing here, that if we say, if I have to say that one for potential, we've got over 22 entitlements that have been assigned to this real estate manager. And if you've got department location, it becomes more accurate. So we've got 5 identities that have identical access. And from this, it just gives us an idea that we can actually build out a role based upon that. Decision. And that's not just for SAP, but for every application. So it can be for Active Directory, for SAP, any type of entitlements. And that can help to speed up a lot of that process around entitlement management. All right, moving on to the next. Just giving a more of a teaser around that. One of the other things is once you build out those roles in the particular one, what you can do is that it's very straightforward. You can add additional entitlements and profiles, and AI will propose that. And the good thing is you can do it across, and this is a real benefit from an enterprise versus a normal one, is that you can have Active Directory, you can have SAP, and you can build these conceptual roles that are not just specific for SAP, but for everything, like an accounts payable. So they don't have to request multiple, and that gives you a better certification, better user experience as well. The other thing is you can define position-based security. And it's not just based on a job title, but you can base it on any type of attribute that you can build in there: business unit, location, division, high duties, initials, whatever you want, licensing. And as long as they've got that thing, then that drives position-based security, or you can make it requestable as a part of that process. And you put different governance groups as a part of that process. And then sort of finishing it off is really around, once you've got that roles built, then you can start running certification processes. And this is a real value that technology can give you, is really about having that automation. And what this does is it gives you the ability to, to actually drive it. And so we've got this option around AI, and it's called AI generation around certification. What this does is that it tells you recommendations saying that 6% of identity don't have that. And this is where you can help guide that person and manager to say, actually, we should probably remove that from them. And that helps to remove too much excessive access, especially from an SAP point of view. And then the other thing is it does it for the entitlement as well. So if I look at this one, only 2% have that particular entitlement. And therefore, we recommend actually removing that from that person. And a lot of AI can help to speed up that particular process around that. I won't touch on it too much. So what I want to do is...
I think I'm just in the interest of time, and there's a lot to cover. And it's certainly, I'm really excited about some of these game-changing capabilities that are finally going to move us away from, having to do a lot of these processes manuals for end users to have to interpret information and understand, well, I don't even remember what that role does. I think there's so much value here, and also understanding what do the peers of this user have in the certification process to make really informed decisions, data-driven decisions, AI-driven decisions, rather than necessarily guesswork or making it a tick and bash exercise. So I'll just reshare my screen, and if that works, let me know.
Yeah, and sort of closing is that identity is challenging, and any program is going to, there's lots of hiccups, there's lots of uncertainty along the way. But what we recommend is really about, there are a lot of organizations that have been down that journey. That, like the largest ship represents that, organizations with huge budgets and resources that have integrated successful SAP system. And what we always recommend is, having the right partners like Turnkey, that we're specialists in the SAP space that can also guide you as well. And that's sort of key to really getting there, so you don't have to make the same mistakes, and you're pretty much following trails that have been treaded already, as opposed to being a guinea pig and trying to fudge your way through these particular situations. So I think we'll just jump after
that. Well, Richard, yeah, and we're certainly always at hand to help both bridge the gap, navigate some of those difficult conversations, and really look at your specific needs and challenges, which we always know will be unique to every single organization. I guess with the time that we have remaining, we'd really love to get stuck into some of the questions that are coming from the audience. Richard, maybe you pick up the first one. I'll try and find the Q&A button.
How do we convince the United States of SAP that they will not lose their autonomy? And I think that's where I covered before, that it's really about talking to say, no, you don't lose your autonomy, you keep it. We just give you a platform, and you don't need to manage it. You don't need to have the right resources, pay for licensing costs. Instead of investing all that money into an SAP solution, just invest it into one, like a SailPoint solution, and we'll be able to govern that for you. And let them give them full autonomy to run, their own RBAC roles, their segregation of duties, and other things. And it seems to work quite well as one of your key stakeholders.
I see another one here, which I think is really closely related, and it's really, is it even practically possible to map the high granularity of SAP role-based access into an enterprise solution? I think, Richard, you've already slightly touched on that. I think worth also noting that granular component, and one that's certainly been a challenge for SAP customers to manage, and hence having solutions like SAP GSC to do so. It is a component of SailPoint as well. It's called the SAP Access Risk Management module of SailPoint, and that really starts to highlight and answer to some of those questions. But I think as we chart our way forward into cloud-oriented architecture for both SAP and non-SAP, you can imagine that the future architecture really is a disparate set of applications in order to achieve one singular end-to-end process, and that is really fundamentally an enterprise game rather than necessarily an SAP game. So you might start your procure to pay process in one application and end it in another, including SAP. So I think in order to get that fabric of what a person really needs as a role-based access entitlement, you have to take the enterprise view, because there will be a dependence on AD groups, there will be a dependence on direct authorizations and roles in a system like SAP. But ultimately that fabric has to come together from an end user's point of view. That might be completely transparent. They might be using a user interface that they really don't know whether they're interacting with SAP, Ariba, or another component that's non-SAP related in that end-to-end process.
Yeah. And I think, Rob, also the good thing is that we provide that deep integration in SAP around segregation of duties. So even though we've got our separation of duties, which is more at the application level, you can put a role to role. But what it does also, it can do that granular check right at the permission level, the Fury level, which is coming out next month, where you can actually, so you've got when they request for a role in Identity Security Cloud, we can do a SOD check and give you that results in that particular, at the separation of duties, which is the application, but also at that real granular SOD, similar to access controls, where it actually says that if you give this one, you're going to cause an SOD violation based upon this role, and that's checked right at that permission level. And I think that's what people want. They want simple. They don't want to have to go to multiple systems. They don't want to get pinged by audit and other things. So I think that's a real value add. We've got another question, Rob.
It was from James, and I won't name it due to Chatham House rules, but we already integrate between SAP and IIQ, which is the on-premise version of the SailPoint software for those who are uninitiated, using the out-of-box connector. So the question was really, do you, in order to access some of the capability that you just showcased, Richard, around ingesting some of the more granular level metadata from SAP roles, do you need to be in ISC, or as previously known as Identity Now, the SaaS version of the software? Is that also available in IIQ?
In most cases and versions, we try to maintain that similarity between the Identity Security Cloud and IIQ. However, over time, the differences will get more and more. It just takes longer to do the testing and version control. And that's where, because of the SaaS-based solution, we do up to 50 to 60 changes a week. IIQ, we have to bundle that together. We have to retro check, make sure we don't break anything, and then people customize it. So there's a lot more complexity around that. But we do try to make sure that similar capability is available, and we will continue to support customers if they do stay on IIQ. But over time, that gap will get more and more in terms of how AI is really going to drive value for customers. So,
all right. No, thank you, Richard, for that. I know we're coming close to the mark of the hour. I think really this is just the beginning of the conversation. By no means are we not available to you to further that conversation? I can see there's a lot more questions that have come through, and we do want to answer them. So I do want to thank you for joining us. As the next step, you will hear from us in the next couple of hours just to ask for your feedback on this session and whether it was valuable. We're always seeking to improve ourselves. And we'll also give you the opportunity and invite you to meet with our experts to discuss your particular concerns, issues, challenges, and needs in this space. Our contact details are here. Both Richard and I myself are highly accessible to our audience, and by all means feel free to reach out and look out for the recording of the webinar, as well as the feedback form that will follow. I appreciate your time today, Richard. As always, awesome to have you on the call, and we'll look forward to speaking to you in a little while.
Yeah, no, thank you, Rob. Appreciate it. The fun discussion around SAP is very interesting topic. Well, for us it is. All right.